Welcome to Series 15, everyone. We've got a great series lined up for you, but first, we have some really special announcements, especially regarding a really cool artistic change that's happening directly because of this series and our discussion with our guest, Tracy Barnett.
Yes, starting this series, we're working on re-recording my tracks on all of our backlog episodes in order to utilize my lower octave 3-2-1 clicky voice more often. It's difficult to stay down in this register all the time, so I don't think I can do this while recording, but we figured it would be a great way to lean heavily into the ASMR scene and make the podcast that much more relaxing to listen to.
Aside from that lovely bit of news, we also would love to talk about AcadeCon 2019. This Kickstarter is still underway right now and goes until April 17th, 2019. I can't talk enough about how amazing this convention has been for me and how wonderful it had been to be able to meet so many wonderful people and spend actual meaningful time with them, whether we're playing games together or just hanging out.
Yeah, the last 2 years have been spectacular for me, and I really hope that we can all go again this year. We still have Gen Con in the plans, but AcadeCon really feels like such a highlight to the year. We'll have a link in the show notes to this Kickstarter. Otherwise, you can go to Kickstarter.com and search for AcadeCon 2019. That's ACADECON space 2019. And you'll find it pretty easily.
In other news, we've gotten some great responses from people who've both submitted questions and those who just listened to the Q&A episode from last week. We really enjoyed doing that, and there are even some bits of advice sprinkled in there that were really great. So we're going to be accepting questions year-round. And when we get a decent amount for a normal-size episode, around maybe 20 questions, we'll do another Q&A grab-bag episode. To make the process easy, just go to questions.charactercreationcast.com.
Finally, if you would like to leave a rating or review for us, there are a few great ways of doing so. Apple Podcasts through iTunes will be the best place to leave us a review. It will be very helpful to get this podcast into more ears, as each review will help us move up the charts a little bit. Also, Stitcher and Podchaser are great places to leave reviews, as well as Facebook. You can leave us a review like Frithkin did on Podchaser. They wrote, "I enjoy the host's even-measured tones and calm yet enthusiastic discussions regarding games. I am anxious a lot of the time. This podcast helps me remain calm. Their positivity shines through, which is always welcome. Character creation is a great insight into a game system."
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Frithkin.
That was a very nice review. We're very excited that we have calm, gentle tones.
I agree wholeheartedly. And you know, after doing a whole intro this way, I don't think my vocal cords can handle it, Amelia. So I think we'll just have to nix the idea. Or, fess up that this is just an April 1st ruse.
Yeah, I mean, we had a good run, so we tried.
We did try.
We did try. Seriously, we tried to be extra calm in this one for you. You know what I'm not? Calm. No, seriously, Frithkin, I'm really glad that you find that calm and gentle. As somebody who also suffers from a lot of anxiety, I'm glad that it's helping. Anxiety. What a pain. Not a fan. But that was fun. We had a good run with our ASMR episode. So with all that out of the way, the series is not a joke. So let's get on with the show.
Yeah, enjoy. Welcome to Character Creation Cast, a show where we discuss and create characters, the best part of role-playing games, with guests using their favorite systems. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan, and this episode, my co-host Amelia and I welcome Tracy Barnett, designer of the game we are creating characters for today, Iron Edda Accelerated, a Norse mythology-inspired role-playing game.
Tracy, welcome to Character Creation Cast. I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah.
Me too. No, I'm really excited to be here and to be doing this because I really love this game, as one hopes one would. When you're the one that
I mean,
made it.
by this point, you may not. I don't know.
When we get to talking about its development, you'll learn that I definitely do love this game. But I'm really happy to be here. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited. So let's start by introducing you to everybody. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and some projects that you're involved in on top of this one?
Sure. So my name is Tracy Barnett, as they have said. My pronouns are they and them. And I have been designing tabletop role-playing games for the last, it's 2019 now, so I guess technically 7-ish years I've been doing this.
Oh, nice.
Like professionally, as in getting paid for things one way or another, which is wild when I think about it. Mm-hmm. Right now, other than Iron Edda Accelerated, I have, let me see if I can remember all the things that I'm doing. I have an actual play podcast called The Other Cast that I record with some very good friends here in Columbus, Ohio. I am in the process of adding an additional podcast to that network that I am doing with Kate Bowie, who is Army of Meat on Twitter. She and I are starting... it's a world building podcast inspired by All My Fantasy Children and actually you two as well, where we're building an entire world, basically one wiki page at a time. So we're starting with one goblin in their home in the city, and it's a snapshot of that moment in time, and we'll describe that entire thing in the first episode, and then we will highlight things in that description that we are interested in as wiki pages, if you will, that don't go anywhere yet. And the next episode, we or the audience will pick the next page we go to, and then we'll describe that thing.
That's so
in the same,
cool.
In the exact same moment in time, this frozen snapshot of like this instant, and then we'll build more pages off of that, and eventually things will get linked together. And
are you making an actual wiki for this?
I would imagine so, because in part of my discussions with Kate about whether or not she wanted to do this project with me, she told me that she has done world building wikis just for the fun of it. So I was like, oh yes, this is fantastic then. So I have a feeling that will be a component of it. So that's going to be under the Other Cast umbrella as well. That podcast and the actual play are part of my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Tracy Barnett. And also as part of that, I make a small game every month. So I've been doing that now. March will be the 9th one in a row. So
nice.
I've written and done the art, usually just publicly available, license-free art and layout for 8 games so far. I have to write marches yet. That inspired me to, I guess I'm going to be putting together an anthology of small games.
I saw that. I saw, like, all of a sudden you were like, well, guess I got to do this.
And it's funny because I've listened to y'all talk to designers before, and you've discussed that moment where the idea turns from just a thing into a capital T thing. Mm-hmm. And I found that the divide between what I can feel are decent to good ideas and them becoming capital T things is vanishingly thin.
Yes.
Right now. So I asked if people would be interested on Twitter. I got a lot of response. There are now over 50 people on the Discord server that I set up last week.
That's crazy.
And those 50 people are all voting on what the theme of the first anthology will be. And I say first anthology because it really seems like there's going to be more than one. So what has turned from an idea of, oh, hey, maybe I can do a thing, it's become what will maybe, hopefully, become an ongoing project where I can kickstart a small anthology every so often of, like, say, 4 games, pay all the writers at least 10 cents a word, make sure that the makeup of the writers is as diverse as I can manage, probably do the layout myself, probably hire someone else to edit after the first little bit, basically do it like I'm doing my Patreon games, but with other people's games, just not my own.
That's so cool.
Nice.
I hope so. And then whatever gets sold after the fact, the money will be split evenly between myself and the creators. So it is a cooperative. We all share in the profits to an equal measure. Because I've been reading a lot that DC has been talking about on Twitter, and I think it's really, really good stuff. That's Dungeon Commander on Twitter, for those of you who are listening along at home. No E in Commander. DC
Is brilliant.
has absolutely. And they are also extremely humble about it, but they are one of the voices that I listen to in role-playing games right now, above almost anybody else, because they are doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. They are really good at highlighting other people's work, at just sort of helping people organize things and kind of get some of that stuff in order, and really just being super honest about things and, you know, the things that we as a community need to work on, and just like always very thought-provoking. Like they're a good follow. If you're looking for new people on Twitter, follow DC.
Thought-provoking, thoughtful, and the sort of list of accords, if you will, or standards for queer people of color who are writers in gaming or working in gaming is a set of standards that, although as a white person I cannot and will not ever ask to sign on to it because that's not what it's for, they are standards that I think everyone should strive to meet, because we don't make enough money in tabletop role-playing games to make it a sustainable business for most people. And I think that we might be at the start of the tide changing on that. And it would require a bunch of new business models, but that's okay, because some of the ones that are out there are really broken.
Right.
Yeah, I heard that tabletop role-playing games as an industry made about, what, 55 million last year only?
Yep.
When you consider as many creators that are out there, that new games are coming out every other day, it's wild that it seems like such a small number compared to other industries.
I think we're all just trading them back and forth between each other. I think that's part of the problem. There needs to be a broader audience for sure.
And there's a whole lot of it where there's a very strange divide between it being a hobby and it being a profession, and people not wanting to buy into capitalism, but also wanting to get their stuff supported. It's a whole lot.
Yeah.
Go read what DSC has talked about. Yeah. They've put it far more eloquently than I can. Plus, it's a lot to take in. Like, I've been absorbing these changes for years now. So a lot of it's internalized, and I have difficulty, like, expressing it externally. Plus, that's not the point of this particular show. So,
I mean, we could do a whole thing on that, but
we totally could. To circle back around and finish answering the question that you asked about what else I'm working on. I write for Gnome Stew. I'm doing a series of interviews with gamers in the community focusing on marginalized identities. So I'll have another one of those hopefully coming out this month. I freelance for Paizo. I write for the Starfinder line.
Oh, cool.
Cool.
Yeah, I've got 2 published credits to my name for that so far. I edit manga scripts on the side.
Nice.
It's really interesting. I used to work in document translation a couple of years ago. So I take the translated Japanese and I make it sound like native English.
That makes sense.
Is my responsibility.
Well, hopefully it does. Gig. If they do their job correctly, it should make sense, Ryan.
Yeah. But
jokes.
And I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Like, Oh, yeah, I did a stretch goal for Blades in the Dark that I have turned in to John and Sean. I co-founded Exploding Rogue Studios with Brian Patterson. We wrote Carthoon Lands of Conflict, and we're still working on stretch goals for that. I have a project called Valkyries that is in the work with Galileo Games. It also uses Fate Accelerated. And I think that is what I have going on right now, just those things.
Do you eat or sleep or any of those fun people activities?
I do, and I also have a full-time day job. I'm a beer buyer for a local grocery store.
Oh, goodness.
So the trick that I have found that works for me is none of those things really happen all at the same time. I have also reached out for help when I need it. So Rob Abrazato edits all of the episodes for the other cast, including the new one that's coming out, because I was running out of room to edit. As I'm sure you both know, it is time consuming, and actual play is harder than just about anything else.
Yes, yes, I'm not envious of that. I will not take on that editing.
Especially because we record into one Yeti that sits on the table.
Oh, no.
So it's not discrete tracks. We don't have a soundboard, so I can't mute side conversations. It just has to... We have to be as clean as we can when we're recording, and then the work has to go in on the back end.
Yeah.
So I still have 2 days off of work a week. And for example, last week I had an assignment due for a stretch goal for Greg Stolze's game Rain. And because I just started a new job a few weeks before, I was behind on my goal. So I had to get 8,000 words written in 2 days.
Oh, wow.
I'd never done it before. So what ended up working for me in that instance was on my 2 days off, which were consecutive, I would write 1,000 words because I can sprint pretty well when it comes to writing. And then I would take a break for an hour and do something, anything else. I cleaned the house, I played video games, I just took a break. And then I did another 1,000 words. And I did that 4 times each day, 2 days in a row.
Oh, perfect.
So it worked. I don't know if that will ever work again, but that time it did.
Yeah, I think once you find your system, it's a little bit easier to do a lot of projects. Like that's a thing that I'm kind of figuring out right now, is just that once you get down how to do them, it is a lot easier to do that many things, because you do fit it in here and there, you know, like editing and stuff too. I will do like, you know, an hour or so over a couple nights to try and do it. I can't sit down and do it end to end. Like, doesn't work for me.
And it's a thing that I wondered a lot about when I was first getting started writing, was how people work consistently, because I did not have a great work ethic at all growing up, and I've had to develop one. And it's a cliche, but it really is like doing physical exercise. It's training, it's practice. And once you are better at it, you can often do more with the time that you have. It also helps that I'm not massively depressed from a job that I hated. Like,
doesn't that make a huge difference?
Oh my goodness. So the job that I'm in right now, I absolutely love. I have evenings with my partner, which I did not have before because I was working a closing shift 5 days a week, and closing meant 11 p.m. or 1 a.m.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And that was for a year that I did that. And then I had 2 other very stressful or not great jobs. My partner has never known me happy in a job since we've been together until now. And now it's great. So like when I had to get 8,000 words done, I wasn't in a pit of self-loathing of beating myself up for why hadn't I gotten it done already. I was just like, okay, well, I need to get it done.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get it done.
Yeah, it makes such a huge difference to like, because you're at work for so long, like 40 hours is a long time. And I switched jobs, I think like 3 years ago, and holy crap, it makes a huge difference to just not hate what you are doing all day long.
Yeah, it's wild, the difference that it makes. So it sounds like a lot that I do. It is a lot. It has gotten to be more. Like, this anthology was not anything that I had been looking for. Same for the podcast with Kate. Like, it just was an idea that turned out it needed to be something that I was doing. but I have tried to find ways to have it impact things as little as possible. So with the podcast with Kate, it's going to be recording once every other week for an hour, maybe 2. Beyond that, I just have to give the audio to Rob, and when it's edited, I have to post it. So the overall cognitive load of it across my week is very minimal.
Yeah.
And that's the trick. Like, I'm not thinking about all of these things all the time.
Right. Yeah, there's something to be said for some of those projects that are, especially when you like the person that you're doing it with, because then it becomes hanging out with friend time. And it's just, we have a specific thing that we're talking about, but we're still just hanging out.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Aw, thanks.
Aw.
Awesome. Well, how about we go ahead and get into the core of this episode and discuss what this game is all about.
What's in a game?
So, since this is a new game, could you go ahead and give us a quick pitch for the game, like the genre, settings, and whatever?
Sure. This is going to sound practiced because it is.
It should be.
I've refined this pitch over years. So here is the pitch for Iron Edda Accelerated. Ragnarok happened in the form of 50-foot-tall metal dwarven destroyers rising out of the ground. Humanity said, oh gods, what do we do? And Loki said, hey, I have this thing that I totally didn't steal from the dwarves. It'll let you bond the spirits of your bravest warriors to the bones of dead giants. And y'all can Pacific Rim this action.
It's
That's
giant bone mechs, Ryan.
See, okay, I'm totally here for this.
It's,
Yeah.
I told you.
I know.
It's metal is what? I'm so excited.
Yes, it is. It is indeed. So yeah, the genre is Norse fantasy. The setting is analogous to our own world. In fact, the country of the Viking type folk that you typically play, I refer to as Midgard, even though traditionally that's the name of a whole realm, like Earth. So there's Midgard. There are also analogs to all of the other countries or people groups that Vikings historically had contact with. So there is a Native American analog called the Orofagir, which is a rough translation of Old Norse for brave warrior. There is a British Isles and Celtic analog called the Isles of Mist. There is a Roman Empire analog called the Petruvian Empire. There is an Arabian Ottoman Empire type analog in the Desert Traders of Brand. And then I should have come up with a more clever name, but there is actually also an East Asia and China analog called the Jade Empire. So all of those different peoples exist in the world, but primarily you play the Viking type folk. Because the area stretches across a territory that is roughly analogous to all of Europe in our world, the Viking tradition of long ships and pillaging and whatnot is accomplished via rivers rather than the ocean, which is historically accurate as well. The reason Vikings were able to trade with Muslims back in the day is because of the rivers that flowed through Europe, because their long ships could do ocean or river and could be ported across cataracts in the river. So yeah, and there are also 9 rivers in traditional Norse myth. So hey, guess what? There are 9 rivers in my world, and they're all named the same as the traditional Norse stuff. But yeah, it's Ragnarok. It's epic, and it is personal stories on a heavy metal soundtrack.
That's awesome.
That's a good pitch.
Yeah, it is.
That's the short pitch. The one I gave you is the elevator pitch, and then what we're going to do now is all the rest of the stuff.
Yes. Well, that's what the rest of the show is the rest of the pitch for this game.
There you go.
What sort of things do we need to play this game? I know that there's a book and dice, but they are not regular dice.
They are not regular dice. So this game is built using Fate Accelerated. For the mechanically minded of you out there, it is a drift on Fate Accelerated as seen in Dresden Files Accelerated. as published by Evil Hat. There is some very cool mechanical tech from that game. They're called, of course, I can't remember the name right now off the top of my head. They're called conditions. And they let you create sort of D&D like archetypes for the characters. You can say, this kind of person has these specific abilities they can always do, and then you can customize them in further ways. Whereas Fate, as written, is much more open-ended. You guys have talked about that on previous episodes. It's a lot of the group deciding what the setting is going to be like and what things can do, what characters can do. And with this version of Fate Accelerated that I've written for Iron Edda, there's a lot of specificity that lets you be creative within those constraints, because constraints are super, super important to actually having good creative moments.
Absolutely. That's something we've definitely talked about before, because I don't do well with that. I get so overwhelmed when things are just too wide open. And I think that, I think a lot of people get better creative ideas when they have a box to work within.
Yeah. So this game has a lot of useful boxes, we'll call them. And then Fate uses a set of dice that are derived from a game called Fudge way back. So a quick history of Fate. I will keep this very brief. So Fudge was a game, an indie game back in like the mid to late 90s that was around. And it was a very straightforward kind of game, except that it used a special kind of dice. And the dice didn't have numbers on them, but they were 6-sided dice that had 2 pluses, 2 minuses, and 2 blanks. And when you roll 4 of them, you get this lovely bell curve of -4 to +4, where 4 minuses is -4, pluses and minuses cancel each other out, so everything clusters around the 0 in the middle. And then you would have bonuses from your skills that you would add to those rolls. So pretty standard gaming stuff. Then Fred Hicks and Rob Donahue, who are the founders of Evil Hat, came up with the idea of aspects, and aspects are the thing that makes Fate what it is. They are short descriptive phrases that make things true. We'll talk more about them in detail when we're doing all of our stuff, I'm sure. But they created a whole economy where you have fate points. You didn't do as well in your roll, you invoke an aspect. This true thing lets you re-roll the dice, and that's where the narrative juice comes from. They made an alpha of that they were running at conventions. They wrote the game with a lot of other help of fans and people they were paying to come in and do it. They wrote Spirit of the Century, which is essentially Fate 2.0. They wrote the original Dresden Files RPG, and then in 2013 they kickstarted Fate Core, which is the basis for everything that we're doing now. So Fate Core trimmed down the number of aspects, introduced marginal successes at a cost, like Apocalypse World.
Oh, very cool.
Or, PBTA games do. And then also had a drift called Fate Accelerated that was focused on how you do things rather than what you're doing. So rather than, I have a fighting skill. No, are you doing things forcefully, quickly, flashily? And that turned into the basis for what I used for this game. So that's a very, very super condensed version of the lineage of all this stuff. But it marks why Fate is different. You need the dice that generate that bell curve, a lot like 2d6 in a PBTA game does. And you need the aspects, because that's where narrative meets mechanics. And the two play off of each other very well in this game. And it's why Fate is the system of my heart for that reason. Like, it is the system that speaks to me the most. I love PBTA games. They do a lot of that, but in very different ways. And I also really love Genesis from Fantasy Flight Games, which has very similar concepts, but again, executed very differently. It does some of that stuff with like threats and advantages, but without aspects in play. And you could easily... Aspects can be grafted onto a lot of things. It's really kind of neat. And also, if you've played D&D 5th edition, personality traits, flaws, bonds, ideals, those are like baby aspects.
Yes. They're broken down a little bit more, but... If you could get more than 1 point of inspiration, and you had to like explicitly say, this flaw is why I'm able to spend my inspiration, and I get it back because this flaw hurts me,
That's aspects in the Fate Point economy, right? So D&D took a step in that direction and didn't quite go all the way.
Interesting.
So yes, you need the book, which is based on Fate. You need the special dice, and you need the character sheets.
Awesome.
To finally actually answer the question.
We got a quality lesson in game design.
I think this joke will make sense a little bit more later. My high concept for this particular episode is, and I digress.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Okay, so what do characters do in this game then?
The characters in this game stand in defense of, or in protection of, or don't, their Holdfast. It is the name given to the home that you have in the world, right? Your town, your village, your gathering of dwellings. And part of what makes this game unique or interesting, I won't say unique, there are other games that do this. Part of what makes this game interesting is that you don't start off by creating characters, and neither will we. Ooh. You start off by making your Holdfast. So there's a series of, I believe in the final of this game, it's 112 different questions that you can potentially roll. And as you answer those questions, you bring detail to your table's version of the world.
Oh, cool.
So there are only a few things in the game that are canonical for every table. Other people take them all kinds of different directions by answering these questions. That gives you the place and the plot hooks that you're going to engage with. And then you make the characters who will engage with those things in very specific ways based on what their archetypes are and what their outlook on things is. So there are dwarves attacking. The war's been going on for 7 to 10 years, I believe, at this point in time. The dwarves and their destroyers are a known thing, and they have started doing this thing when they attack. Rather than just destroying holdfasts, they are the destroyers can actually engage in effectively a self-destruct sequence and open a portal to Svartalfheim, which is the dwarven homeworld, and start bringing in hundreds of thousands of gallons of liquid dwarven metal, which then shapes into a dwarven city, or if the portal is up in the air, rains down on the land, and boy, that's bad news. So there's a lot of different stuff that a lot of different directions the game can go because, and this is one of the things I love about it, even though it's heavy metal Ragnarok on the tin, a lot of the archetypes in the game are built to have recovery of their special abilities contingent upon how connected you are to the community around you and what it means when you are not. Mm-hmm. And so the short little tagline I gave earlier of personal stories on a heavy metal background, the game ends up being about the people.
Right.
Like, yeah, you can be a warrior who can summon forth the bones of a dead giant, and holy crud, it is amazingly cool moments in the game happen because of that. But then when the giant's gone, when the bones are gone, you're a person in a holdfast with other people around you who is living with the spirit of a dead giant in their head. What does that, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like that's what you get to explore when that's the context of your life now.
Wow.
Yeah, it leads to some really cool character moments, I think, when you get to explore all of those little pieces and to start pulling on some of those threads that you've put down in the character creation and in the holdfast creation. I think that we got to play with a lot of, I guess I haven't said that on this recording. Yeah. I played in this game at AcadeCon in 2017. And it was amazing. It was the best game of that convention for me. That was my highlight. Aww. Walking away. It was so much fun. We had a really good group. We had a really cool story that involved backstabbing, which everyone knows is my favorite. But it wasn't me this time. I didn't do the backstabbing. So Nathan, I will still never forgive you for that. But it was so much fun. And we got to have lots of really cool, really deep character moments, which was, that's hard to achieve in a 4-hour game. But I think the way that the characters and aspects and stuff work off of each other, I think lends itself to that really well.
Yeah.
For the one time I played it, I guess.
Everything blends together.
That's my opinion. So we've touched on it a little bit, but I want to know specifically what you think is, let's say, most unique about this game.
So what I think is most unique about this game is that initial pitch, which is funny because it comes from a bunch of different sources of inspiration that a lot of people are familiar with. I'll leave it at that for now because the next bit is the history of this game and how it came to be. And so there's all that gets explained there. But the idea of Norse fantasy mecha, right, being a thing while also not being a traditional, like, sort of anime mecha kind of thing, but still providing the emotional moments that traditional mecha stories can give, you know, when the pilots are fighting with everything that they've got and their transformation sequences and all that really cool stuff. It's still, it stands out, I think, in that way, because there are a lot of mecha games or mecha inspired games, and there are a lot of Norse games and Norse inspired games. I think this is the only Norse mecha game.
Yeah.
Like, that exists within a traditional fantasy context for the most part. Because there are Norse themes in a lot of mecha games. You get a lot of names of things. Heck, I'm playing Persona 5 right now, and you summon all kinds of deities. Like, I've got a persona named Thor. You know what I mean? Like, it's all over. But Iron Edda tends to stand out because of that. And when I give the pitches for it, unless people are just not into those kinds of things, which is totally cool if that's the case, I tend to get interest, like, immediately, which is really, really useful when you're running a convention game and you want to capture people's attention and get everyone on the same page.
Yeah, they're two genres that I would not have put together, but it's, you know, I'm a fan.
Yeah. So speaking of the history of the system, how about we get into that a little bit here? So why did you go and make this game?
So I made this game initially because I was going to be a stretch goal on somebody else's Kickstarter. There was a Kickstarter back in 2013, just after the Fate Core Kickstarter ended. It was going to be the first non-Evil Hat Fate Core based game, at least that I was aware of. It was called Apotheosis Drive X. And from the name of it, you might guess that it was a mecha game, like tip-to-toe, Gundam Wing style mecha game. And I knew the creators. I wanted to be a stretch goal, but I don't know that much about mecha. So I was sitting around and thinking, okay, I want to pitch to this thing. What do I know? It's like, well, I know fantasy, right? That's the genre that I know. And I happen to be, which could be any point in time because I love it, I was playing a lot of Skyrim at the time. And I was, you know, messing around in some of the dwarven ruins in Skyrim, which are these, if you've not played it, the dwarves in Skyrim are actually another species of elf, which also influenced Iron Edda, as a quick aside. And their ruins are not quite steampunk, but it's a melding of, like, magic and technology. It's the only place where you see automatons rolling around. And there are these big automatons in the deeper levels called dwarven centurions. And I started thinking about what would happen if the centurions ever made it to the surface of Skyrim. And I was like, oh, well, you'd need to fight them somehow. I was like, well, how would you fight them? And my first answer was dragons. And I was like, that's so done. That's been done. Dragonlance did Dragon Riders better than anyone I can think of. And there was another Fate game called Dragon Riders that I don't think ever got published that I played, which is where the Holdfast creation actually came from. Oh, cool. As an aside. But I'm like, okay, I don't want it to be dragons. So what else in Skyrim could it be? And I was like, oh, well, it could be giants, because there are giants in Skyrim that run around. And I was like, well, okay, are you going to bond yourself to, are they going to ride on the giant's shoulders? Like, no, that's not it. What if the giants were dead? And that was that like fusion point where everything sort of kicked off. I was like, well, if they could move the bones of the giants, how would it be? Oh, they'd totally be floating in the rib cage. And as the person moves, so would the giant. Like, and I just immediately started to get that juice. Yeah. So I pitched it. They liked it. Sadly, I never got paid for the work. So I asked them to not publish it, and they did not. but it was licensed under Creative Commons. So I could make my own version of it. So in 2014, I took the 8,000 word initial non-play tested just document and I fleshed a whole bunch of stuff out. I took it to Metatopia in 2013 and I had it signed up for, they were called alpha sessions at the time. It's a 2-hour thing where you say, okay, I have specific things I want to solve the problems of, and they put you with game designers who can do that. My first was a high test session where they get people who are very familiar with the system to come in and help you. So I'm in this room, sitting down at Metatopia, and 2 people walk into the room, and on my left ends up sitting Fred Hicks, and on my right ends up sitting Rob Donahue. If you'll remember, those are the 2 people who made Fate.
They would be the experts, I guess.
They know a little bit about it.
A little bit. So that entire session was like watching a tennis match back and forth, as there were 4 other people at the table. I barely remember who they were. We made characters. We figured out how scale was going to work. We figured out magic, because they were just ping-ponging ideas back and forth. And I was like, yep, and writing notes down. So then I had another session, and at that session were John Adamus, who was an editor for Evil Hat at the time, and Clark Valentine, who wrote Fate Accelerated, by the way, with some other folks.
Wow.
And we tested those ideas, and it all worked out really, really well. So I kickstarted Iron Edda War of Metal and Bone in 2014. And it succeeded. It raised almost $20,000. It hit almost 2 stretch goals. And my stretch goals were for other people to write versions of Iron Edda in other systems, completely, totally different systems. So there is a Powered by the Apocalypse version called World of Metal and Bone that I believe is still on DriveThruRPG. And there was going to be another one, but we didn't quite make it there. And I had stretch goals up to $100,000 because I had way more enthusiasm than I had sense. So I wrote that version of the game. And when I ran it at conventions, it played pretty well. But I was going through a lot at the time. I had recently been divorced. I had moved into a house on my own in a city I'd never lived in on my own, really. I was also writing an Iron Edda novel because, again, ambition, sense. And I never figured out how to build a community around the game. I never figured out how to market it well. So there are still nearly 1,000 copies of the original game sitting in my basement right now, with a roughly equivalent number of copies of the novel. I think both have their merits, but I also knew that Iron Edda could be more than I had originally made it to be. So back in 2016, I met with the folks from Encoder Designs. There's a lot of overlap between those folks and Gnome Stew, who I already wrote for. So I asked for a meeting with them, talked to them at Origins that year, and pitched them the idea of a new version of Iron Edda, laying out everything. They knew how many copies I had sitting. They knew the whole thing. And they liked the idea. It was that same summer that Dresden Files Accelerated came out. Because I was in my mind, I'm like, okay, you might have done it again. You pitched a thing really well. How are you going to do this? Like, how are you going to make it different enough? And then I saw the tech that's baked into characters in DFA. The tech of conditions and the way they work with aspects, and we'll talk about it more when we get to our characters, but it's really, really good stuff. It says you have these powers you can use when you mark this box and this fictional condition has been satisfied. And then to recover those boxes, you have to do another fictional thing to get the powers back. So it's another lovely little give and take. And it let me find the heart of what was missing from Iron Edda originally, because there were no consequences to using the power before. You could summon the bones of a dead giant whenever you wanted to summon the bones of a dead giant. The seers could cast their spells and create these broad-based effects, no problem. The rune scribed could summon forth the power of their rune, and it was just a thing. In Iron Edda Accelerated, because those powers are tied to conditions, and conditions have to be recovered certain ways, all those powers come with a cost now. And it's explicitly spelled out. So with the Bone Bonded, for example, yeah, you've got, I think, in the final draft, 3 boxes that you can use to summon the bones of a dead giant. To get those boxes back, you have to indulge in the giant's worldly desire. This is a thing that the dead giant in your head misses about being alive.
Yep. That's what I played.
And
That's amazing.
yeah. And if you, depending on how you pick that thing, it could be very obvious that your human body is not meant for these things, or that the things a giant wants don't jibe with living around other people. So in the campaign that I ran for the other cast, the giant's worldly desire was pyromania.
Oof.
So in that game, the entire northern edge of the Empire of Petruvia was burning because of this bone bonded.
Interesting.
Because there was a big fight in the Holdfast, and the Jarl's daughter took a bone bond as a last-ditch effort to save the Holdfast and couldn't control the giant after that, and so the giant went herring through northern Petruvia and lit the whole thing up.
Wow.
And that tied into all the hooks we made for the story and everything, so you have to contend with that as a bone bonded. If you indulge too much, or indulge too little, and the giant takes over and just rides your body around like a skin suit for a little while, doing whatever it wants to, you have a condition called abomination, where the Holdfast shuns you until you work your way back into their graces, because your power is a necessary evil. Or not evil, a necessary dangerous thing to have around. The rune scribed, if they use their runic power too much without enough recovery, their approaches, like the way they do things in the game, start to be taken over by the rune, and they have to use the rune, and it starts to spiral down and down and down and down until they explode. Oof. Literally just explode. Even the Scald, like the Teller of Tales, right? If you spill someone's secrets and you get caught, you're on the outside. So, the same for the Seer. It's about whether or not you are working with the society around you. And that can mean so many different things, because every table makes a different kind of society. So it's never this, oh, well, you have to adhere to the Viking code or you're out. No, your table decides who you are as people. And then the game mechanics feed into that in whatever way makes sense for your Holdfast.
And I think that that's a thing that I personally would want people to understand about RPGs, is that I think that you have the best experience when your actions have consequences. And I played for a long time with people who were not big fans of failing rolls or having, conditions or whatever you want, depending on the game we were playing. And I think that sometimes stories stall out, or they just start to not feel good if you do the thing and then next day do the thing again, and then you do the thing again. It gets old, because I think that you don't have good stories if there's not some kind of conflict. And it doesn't always have to be person to person, but that conflict within yourself or with someone else, or, I'm a political science major, so we can talk about types of conflict if we wanted. But I think that stories are built off of those things. And so if actions don't have consequences, your story can just stall out, because why are you doing anything then? What are you fighting against? What are you fighting for? Why are you doing anything at all?
Yeah. And I think that in the games of War of Metal and Bone, which is the original one that I was playing or running at conventions, a lot of those consequences would come up naturally in the fiction, and Fate is a game where you get fate points back by having the downsides of your aspects highlighted in play. So consequences are a natural part of that system. So things were coming up, right? It was problematic that you have a giant in your head. Moving to the conditions of Fate Accelerated, though, let me really codify it. It let me put teeth to it in a way that's not punishing to the players, but evokes good story. And almost universally, when people sit down and start reading through the archetypes, just reading the conditions that they have, because that's all that's there to start with, you immediately can start sensing the ramifications of using those powers. And for people who are into that kind of game, the juice starts flowing already. Even before you've started playing, you're like, okay, I'm going to get into some stuff in this game, and it's going to be real good.
I, at the risk of drawing all of this out longer, I want to ask you why you felt that the previous version wasn't enough or wasn't quite right, or what was the thing that made you say, I have to keep working on this?
it was the reactions that I saw when people played it at conventions. And primarily at conventions because that's where most of my play has happened. I've done 2 short campaigns of this, but I get to introduce the game to people. We make holdfast and characters in the first half of the game. We play with those characters in the second half of the game. And people would walk away going, oh my gosh, that was great. They would have similar reactions to what you had, Amelia, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're like, that was kind of the highlight of my convention. Mm-hmm. Like one of my seminal games, I had a group of games on demand. I was hungover in a bad state. I ended up with 8 players at my table.
Oh my gosh.
Well, but 6 of them knew each other and only got to game together at a convention once a year.
Oh, wow.
So their chemistry was apparent. I told them to bring it because I was both struggling and had 8 players. They brought it. That was Friday morning at Origins. Saturday night, all 6 of them came back with their character sheets and said, can we keep going?
Oh, wow.
Like, that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who you are or what game you're playing. That's a thing. And that one right there was like the thing I kept going back to when I was like, I know this game has something, because I was in a bad way. I was not doing my best as a game facilitator at all. Mm-hmm. And the stories that they told were so much theirs, and they were so invested in it that they took another 4 hours of the only time they got to game together in a year, and they came back to do it again.
Wow.
Like,
yeah, there's something said for like, you have this like one time and you picked my game, like that. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm very emotional today. It's been a really long day, and I'm like definitely not crying about this. Like,
oh, Amelia.
Feelings. These are good feelings.
Yeah.
That's so good though. I just like,
it is.
Oh, that's so good.
And so I had something, there was something there, right? Mm-hmm. There was something that this game did. And for some sessions where I wasn't majorly hungover, with fewer numbers of players at the table, there were things that I did, yes, at the table as a GM and a facilitator and a person pitching the game that also worked. But those things also weren't in the original book. Mm-hmm. I did not do a good job of conveying how I did what I did at the table, because the original book required you to buy Fate Core.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't a rules-inclusive book. Mm-hmm. Iron Edda Accelerated is. Everything you need to play is in the book. And I did that on purpose this time because I wasn't going to leave out the things that I did that I knew made the game work.
Yeah.
And refining the mechanics through the framework of DFA, and then purposefully looking at how it and Fate Accelerated and Fate Core explain how to play the game and going, well, this is how I do this, and this is how I know it works. And putting that in the text made it so much better than it was before.
Well, yeah, because you can't be in everybody's house running all of their games for them. So it becomes really important then to convey that. And I think that that's a thing that a lot of books struggle with. I always laugh at the beginning part of RPG books that are like, here's what an RPG is. And I understand like why it's there. But once you start to get past that, there are some books that I've read, I'm like, I don't understand what you want me to do or how I'm supposed to run this. Like, you've given me all these lists of skills and things like that. You have told me nothing about how to actually like play this game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a thing that, in my opinion, that like good games do, because I can go and play at a convention with a really great GM and then come home and read this book and be like, well, I want that experience and I can't get that from this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in a very real way, I playtested Iron Edda Accelerated as the game that it was, with the playbooks or the archetypes written as they are. I ran 2 sessions at Big Bad Con in 2017, which were miserable failures. I ran 2 sessions at AcadeCon in 2017, which is where the game clicked for me for the first time, because I had to divorce myself from the old mechanics. Mm-hmm. I started the short campaign that's on the other cast. The game wasn't finished when we started that. And officially for Iron Edda Accelerated, that was the only playtesting I did.
Oh, wow.
However, I ran Iron Edda from 2013 until 2018 when the new version was done. So in a lot of very real ways, War of Metal and Bone is like an ash can of what became Iron Edda Accelerated. It was the first version.
Interesting.
And Iron Edda Accelerated is the game that it should have been all along, that there was no way I could have written at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I play tested it for 5 years because when I got the mechanics right, I knew they were right.
That's a good
awesome.
feeling.
That's
a good
awesome.
moment of yep, this is the one.
This is it. Yeah. And I think Amelia, that your game at AcadeCon was the first game that I ran that weekend, and that game was when things clicked. So you were part of that experience, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it was such a good game. It was such a good game. And I wish I remembered more of what the story was and everything. I just remember that I was bone bonded and my giant wanted to be warm, and it was a really good game. That's all I really remember about it, but it was so good. I walked away and was this is, yes, correct.
Wonderful.
So were there specific feelings or ideas that you wanted to evoke with this game?
Not as such from the outset. I just knew, especially if you consider War of Metal and Bone to be the playtesting for Iron Edda Accelerated, I knew that that drama and that personal connection between the characters needed to be something that happened, because that gave everything some grounding. Otherwise, it was just over-the-top action, and there's a place for that. But I wanted players to leave the table feeling something more than just, oh my gosh, that was Gonzo.
Yeah.
Because there are games that can do that reliably, like Fiasco. It can easily go really over the top. But I wanted people to react the way you did, Amelia. I wanted them to leave the table. I could not give a fig if you remember the specifics of the session. I don't.
Right.
But what I remember is feeling really good about how it ended. And that's more important to me, and always has been. Feeling has always been more important to me than specifics. So it took me a long time to figure out what specific things I needed to write
to make the feelings happen.
Feeling, yeah. Regardless of what the feelings are. Your game featured betrayal. Not all of them do. In fact, most of them don't. But I wanted to have the things there, I called them teeth, right? That I'm going to carry this Norse metaphor all the way through. You put your hand in Fenrir's mouth because you believe him to be safe. And you go to pull away, and there's just this little tug because the tooth won't let go. And you leave something of yourself behind, right? You give emotions, and they stay there at the table, and they're ephemeral because that's what we do here in tabletop. And you are a little bit changed because of it. You remember this thing that happened. And that's what I wanted. Yeah,
and I love that about tabletop in general too, is that you spend this time telling these crazy stories with the people at the table, and you walk away with this shared memory of things. Yeah. But generally that's all you leave with. You didn't make a physical thing unless you count your character sheet. But it is this very, like you said, very ephemeral sort of, I walked away with that experience, but that's it. There is nothing tangible to take away. So that experience becomes paramount, because if you don't have that, you have nothing.
Yeah. What did you just spend 4 hours doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting because as you were talking about that, my mind went to the analogy of summer blockbuster movies. You could go to an amazing, high action, high octane movie, leave the movie just totally pumped and say, oh, that was a great movie. There's so much action. It was so cool. Well, what were the characters like? Well, what does it matter? There was explosions and everything everywhere. Versus you have a movie that has a mix of these really deep, intense characters, their interactions, plus there's action as well on top of that. And you leave those movies changed a little bit comparatively. And it's something that sticks with you a lot longer when you have that deep emotional feeling to it.
It's the difference between the first Avengers movie and Black Panther.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy.
Because the first Avengers movie is basically just over the top action. No one's really in danger.
Yeah.
It's not like the second and third ones where there are stakes. right? Oh, New York's being destroyed. We're in a big fight. We're going to stop it. Tony gets in peril at the end. Spoilers, everybody. But like, you're pretty sure he's going to make it back alive because he's Tony Stark and there's only been 2 movies out.
Right.
You know what the timeline is. So like, but then Black Panther comes along. I sobbed like 5 times watching that movie.
I went to see it with my son and he was like patting me on the shoulder. He's like, "You okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine."
Into the Spider-Verse did the same thing.
Oh my God. Oh, the feelings.
Yeah. And so, and even like, so we've just referenced, I'm about to reference the third of my favorite 3 superhero movies of all time now, Thor Ragnarok.
Oh my God, that movie's so good.
Right? It did not pluck the emotional strings that Black Panther and Spider-Verse did, but it provided so much context to the actions. It made everything matter, even though it was like a comedic masterpiece. And, Taika Waititi does that. That's what he's great at. And so that's the same kind of thing. You could have an Iron Edda session that is all lighthearted and fun or being over the top, and there are still going to be these resonant moments where reality pokes its head in and you're like, oh, right. Midgard isn't a place, it's a people. Done. Toast. And like, I know how it sounds to even think about comparing my tabletop role-playing game to works like that. But I think this is a really good game. It's definitely the best thing I've ever written. I can say that without reservation. I think this game can do a lot, and I think that it needed a chance to be able to do it. And without Encoded Design's help, I would not have had that chance. So I'm really glad they decided to give me a shot, because I think I did a pretty good job.
That's awesome.
I would say so. I didn't see the previous one, but this one's real good.
Thank you.
So before we start making characters, I want to go over a couple terms that people might need to know. So let's start with the Holdfast, since that's where we're going to start with our character creation.
Sure. Real simply, Holdfast is the name that I gave in this game because it's evocative for your starting town or village, right? We're going to generate them by rolling on tables and answering a series of questions. To keep things tight, we'll each just do 1 question. Usually I like to have at least 4 if I'm going to be running the game, but as is the wonderful refrain, we don't have to play this.
Yes.
So we can make ourselves some hooks. Yeah, make ourselves some hooks and get into the thing that lets us give context to the characters we're going to make.
Next, I mean, aspects are a big part of Fate, but do you want to, for people who have not played it, do you want to just talk about what those are?
Yeah. So I'll actually jump down 1 bullet point because it's a little bit easier to explain refresh first.
Oh, excellent.
Refresh is the number of fate points you start with at the beginning of every session.
Okay.
So in Fate Core, it's 3. In Iron Edda Accelerated, it's 4 because over-the-top action.
Yeah.
And as you're creating your characters, you can take other special abilities that are unique to your archetype. They're called stunts. Think of them like feats in D&D. That's the easiest analogy for those who have played a lot of that. And past a certain point, every stunt you take lowers your refresh by 1. So if you want to load up your character with all the stunts, you can do so, but you only start with 1 fate point.
Oof.
And the reason that's important is because of aspects. So like I said before, you can invoke an aspect and spend a fate point to either re-roll your dice or get a +2 on your roll when you're playing Fate. And you get fate points back by having the downside of your aspect compelled by the GM, or you can say, hey, I put myself in a bad spot here. Can I have a fate point? Do you want me to do the quick Han Solo rundown of how aspects work to explain that economy? Okay. So Morgan Ellis, who I mentioned before, he is the man who taught me how to play Fate. And this was his example, I believe, given to him by his first Fate GM, but it's a really good one. So Han Solo is our example here. We're talking episode 4. In Fate, pretty much every Fate game ever, your first 2 aspects have types. So you have a high concept, which is the thing that is the most true about your character, and you have a trouble, which is the thing that always sort of gets in your way. So Han Solo's high concept is smuggler with a heart of gold. His trouble is neck deep in debt to Jabba the Hutt. So, Mos Eisley Cantina, Han's sitting across from Greedo. He says, I bet you would, and then fires his blaster. The player rolls the dice. They didn't do as well as they wanted to. So the player holds up a fate point and says, well, I'm neck deep in debt to Jabba the Hutt. This can't happen. And invokes that fictional thing for a mechanical bonus of either a reroll or a +2, shoots Greedo, Bob's your uncle, off they go. End of episode 4. Han has his money. He flies away from the Battle of Yavin, and the GM says to him, hey, you're a smuggler with a heart of gold. Take this fate point. Go back and help Luke. And Han's player goes, crap. Accepts the compel, right? Uses that bit of who their character is to make the situation bad for themselves, but make the story better. Flies back in, saves the day, and we have episode 5 actually happen. So that's how the fate point economy works. You can also create aspects in play. There's an action you can take called create an advantage. So you can say, grab a lantern and set the barn you're in on fire. It's a fictional thing, but if you do the create advantage action, you make an aspect. We write it on an index card, put it on the table, it says on fire, and you put a fate point on it. That fate point can be passed to anyone you're allied with. Because your own little pool from your refresh, you can only spend on yourself. So you take time and so I know, Amelia, you listen to Autonomic.
Me too.
Right? Good. So you know how the characters don't often enough set up advantages narratively to add dice and pay off later, right? That's what creating aspects is, except you just label it. So like if you look around a room that you're in, everything has an aspect. We write down the important ones and put them on cards so everyone is aware of them. But if someone says, I'm going to shoot the lights out, suddenly total darkness is a very relevant aspect. And it stays in the fiction until something changes and someone, lights a match. And then suddenly total darkness changes to dim illumination. And you can create advantages to put more fate points on those narrative things and let other people use them. The other great thing is that created advantages can have as many fate points on them as you want, and they can all be spent on a single action.
Wow.
Whereas as a character, you can only spend your fate points 1 per aspect. So you can't invoke your high concept 5 times for one action, even if you have 5 fate points. You have to find other aspects in the world. Yours, the scenes, those on other characters, including the bad guys. Right. So aspects are the thing that makes fate work, and also why I love it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there any other stuff that you think that we need to know before I think we talked about, because I think skills and stunts are similar, are they not? Or
stunts let you use skills or approaches in this case, in different ways. And what Fate Accelerated does rather than Fate Core is it uses approaches rather than skills.
Okay.
So Fate Core, you have a list of skills like fight and physique and athletics and will. In Fate Accelerated, you have approaches. And the approaches that we specifically use for this game are, let me back up and open a character here real quick because I never remember the names of my own approaches. You have flair. Are you doing things with over-the-top style? You've got focus. Are you taking patience and time to do it? You've got force. Are you just like literally brute forcing your way through? Are you doing things with guile? So you're trying to do things with stealth and subtlety. Are you doing things hastily, or are you doing things with your intellect? And so if you were to do an action while we were playing in this game that we'll never play, you would say, well, I'm going to hit him with my sword. And I'll say, okay, cool. How are you hitting them with your sword? Are you doing it with flair, force, guile, right? And then it's all fictional positioning.
Interesting.
And then you add the rating that you have on that to your die roll. And then stunts let you use approaches in specific contexts better. So, for example, one called Blade in the Dark might say, because I am a skilled blade in the dark, I get a +2 to the attack action using guile when I am hidden in shadows. Right? So narratively, you're hidden. It's like a sneak attack in D&D. But it's all that fictional positioning means that when I do this specific action with this specific approach in this specific context, I get a bonus.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Or other things like once per scene, I can just show up. Like, hi, I'm here.
Ta-da!
Yeah. The Faceless in Apocalypse World 2 has that It's called Oh Yeah after the Kool-Aid Man. 'Cause you can just Kool-Aid Man your way into the room.
I think Spire has one that does that too. I don't remember which one it is, but I just want to use it to like pop up behind people.
I think
yeah,
my
I remember you talking about that with Grant.
Yeah, that might have been yours, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, the stunts are, you can make your own if you want to, but there are preset ones for each archetype. And then we'll talk about how that can change when we get to the advancement section.
All right.
Awesome.
Are we ready to do this?
I'm really excited. Do it. Hey, let's make some people.
Oh, good.
Let's make some people.
Yeah.
Actually, first a Holdfast, though. First, we're going to make a place. Then we'll make some people.
Let's make a place for some people.
Let's make a place.
Let's make a place.
Okay. So, in the Iron Edda PDF, there is a whole table for creating your Holdfast, and I have an older standalone table that did not see the hands of an editor that I will not use. I will instead use the actual table, which begins on page 8 of the PDF, is where the chapter Building Midgard exists. So we're going to use the Google Slides thing that I provided as our sort of map area. And here's what we'll do. There is a top level table with 6 categories. We'll take turns. We'll each answer a question. You roll 2 dice to determine which category you're going to go to. And then when you determine the category, you will then roll 1 die to determine whether your question references the future, the present, or the past. And then you will roll 2 more dice for your specific question. Does that all track?
I think so.
Okay. Who would like to go first?
Well, I don't have fate dice. It's the one problem on my end.
You can just Google fate die roller.
Ooh, fancy.
And then just use the first 2 or the first die that pop up when you do your roll. Because unlike playing a fate game, we don't read the dice mathematically like this. We just look at the results.
Yes.
So do you want to guinea pig this, Ryan? You want to go first?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So I need 2 dice, please. So just make the roll and and tell me what your first 2 dice are.
Okay. So I've got, it looks like on this one, there's 4 dice. If I click it, it randomizes, and I was going to use the top 2, and they were both blank.
Both blank. Okay. So your category is Dictates of Fate, and that category is on page 15 of the PDF. So roll 1 die. You can roll them again, or you can just use your third one. Doesn't matter.
Roll them again. It is a plus.
A plus. So this question has to deal with the future. And then roll 2 more dice.
2 minuses.
2 minuses. So here is your question. A nearby bridge is on the verge of collapse. What resources will be cut off if it is not repaired? What must be done to fix it?
Okay. So I'm assuming that the nearby bridge is either going to some natural resources that our Holdfast uses, or possibly a trade route that would be cut off.
So which is it? You get to pick whatever resource it is.
I'm going to say it is a type of metal that we rely on in the Holdfast for making repairs and building stuff.
So
okay.
Like iron ore, maybe?
Yeah. So the iron mines will be cut off.
Yeah.
What must be done to fix the bridge?
I'm going to say we need to actually get more of the ore into our Holdfast so we can refine it. So we can use that to fix the bridge.
All right, and I'm just going to extend that a little bit and to say that would be dangerous, because if it's on the verge of collapse, how are you going to cart the ore across it? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure that contextually that made sense to me. Okay, cool. So those notes I took on the second slide of our little deck here, and on the first slide, I'm going to go through. You would do this on a piece of paper that sits in the middle of the table if we were playing with a group, but I'm going to delete a whole bunch of things that are on this, and you get to draw something on the map that represents your answer to that question. This is a little bit lifted from the Quiet Year, which uses that collaborative map making as a thing.
I love collaborative world building so much. It is probably one of my favorite things in RPGs nowadays.
So why did we make a show about characters instead of worlds, Ryan?
Because you can't have an interesting world without characters to populate it. Okay, you can, but what's the point?
But then what would you do with it?
Exactly.
All right.
Spin-off.
Yes, that's very good.
Yeah. So for those of you who aren't watching this, Ryan used the arrow icon and then the no or the do not enter icon right over it. If you would also grab a text box and just drop in a quick label for that. And I ask players to do that as well because the labeled things on the map can easily become aspects that we need to know about.
Whoa, that's a big...
So while... yeah, they start off really, really huge. That's just the way that they are. You can just resize it down afterward. And while Ryan is wrapping that up, Amelia, would you like to roll for your question?
Sure. I start with 2?
Start with 2.
I got 2 minuses.
2 minuses. This category is Curse of the Gods.
Yes.
I knew you'd be into that. Give me 1 die.
I got another minus.
Passed.
All right.
And 2 more dice, please.
A minus and a plus.
A minus and a plus. One of the clans in your Holdfast lost favor with the gods. Which clan is it? And what did they do to lose the gods' blessing? So, a thing that is always true in every Iron Edda game, it's one of the few fictional things that is across all of them, is that there are 9 warrior clans in Midgard. And I will rattle them off real quick. When we're making characters, we'll each pick one of these for ourselves as well. But every town has them. Clans cross all socio and political boundaries. You are in a clan because it's who you are, not because of like a familial line or anything. So here are the 9 clans. We have the clan of the bear, the dragon, the hammer, the horse, the ox, the raven, the snake, the sparrow, and the wolf.
Nice.
And if you're looking to the PDF, it's page 40 where those are all listed out.
Okay.
So of those 9 clans, which one is lost in the eyes of the gods?
I am going to say it is... I think it's dragon.
Okay. And
what did they do? Is that the question?
What I believe so. Let me jump back real quick. Yes, what did they do to lose the god's blessing?
I think that they destroyed some kind of like shrine or something like that, some sort of religious location. I think that they messed it up in some of their warmongering.
And some of their shenanigans.
Yes.
Let's see. What do we want to call this thing? Do we just want to call it like the blessed place?
Yeah, I think that works.
Or I usually ask follow-up questions, and I mentioned this in the game too, just to hone in a little bit because it provides more interesting context. Did they do this intentionally or not, this destruction?
I think it was unintentional.
Okay.
Got a little too rowdy.
All right. Cool. Then on the map, you can draw something that represents your answer. So the box in the middle is roughly the walls of the Holdfast. So if this thing was inside the Holdfast, you can put it within that box.
Okay.
And scale doesn't matter. We can resize whatever we need to. Or if it's something that was more away from the Holdfast, you can put it outside.
I think we're going to put it over here. It's going to be this cool lightning bolt. Because it's angry. Text box. I can do this. And what were we calling it? I'm sorry.
The blessed place.
Cool.
Okay. Cool. And that's all we need for that. So I will jump back up and I will now do my question. There we are. I got a plus and a minus, or sorry, a blank and a minus, which is blessing of the gods, which is 17. See, not everything's awful in Ragnarok.
Yeah.
1 die is a plus, which is the future, and 2 dice is another blank and a minus. this is why I love this. So many of these questions, without intending to, just dovetail. Mm-hmm. So here's my question. Your Holdfast has a cadre of blacksmiths crafting the finest weapons in the area, but they're running out of something important to their process. How is the war affecting them? And what do the blacksmiths need to keep forging? So the easy answer would be the iron, right? But that's boring. We've already covered that. So I'm going to say that in order to keep forging, the blacksmiths need to have, well, we would call it coal, right? Because they need something to fire their forges. And I'm going to suggest, so I think the blacksmiths of this Holdfast actually burn their, or power their forge fires with like peat moss.
Oh.
Yeah, dug from like the bogs. And I think those are to the south of the Holdfast. And the question specifically states, how has the war affected them? How's the war affecting them? So that implies that the dwarves are a present threat and have cut off the peat bogs to me. Because it could be the collapsing bridge, but again, that's previously trodden territory, and why not make things worse?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to say that there is what appears to be an inert dwarven destroyer just encamped on the road to the peat bogs. And no one knows if it's going to come to life. No one knows if there's anything inside of it. No one knows if there are reinforcements. It's just there. And it's probably only been there for, as far as we know, a week or two. So no one's gone out to investigate yet because these things are very dangerous. So that's what, we'll do that. So I'm going to make a little arrow here and rotate it and peat bogs. And so what's cool, I see you guys like labeling stuff on the map for your reference. On the second slide, I'm actually writing down the GM notes as if I were going to run this. So we have peat bogs cut off by destroyer, blacksmiths can't forge. So that when I'm running the game, that's all I would write down at this stage, just so I have something I can go on, for reference. And then on the fourth slide, there is a story stress track where, much like a front in Dungeon World or Apocalypse World, I can write an aspect for the entire track, like collapsing bridge. And then above each pair of items, I can write specific aspects of what happens if this problem is not addressed.
Oh, interesting.
And if it's not addressed during a session, I start marking off stress boxes. And then once a pair of boxes is marked, that aspect comes into play.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's how I factor in all this stuff for running the game. As I mentioned earlier, I usually do 4 questions. Do we all want to answer one together just to tie this up?
I really do.
I agree.
I want more problems.
Excellent. Fantastic. So what we'll do is, since there are 3 steps to making the roll, we'll each take a turn. So Ryan, you went first last time, so why don't you roll the first 2 dice?
All right. Boop, 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 boop. It is 2 blanks.
2 blanks. That is the dictates of fate. Page 15. Amelia, roll a single die. Actually, no. I'll roll a single die so the host of the podcast can actually get the question.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So the past, we have a minus. So now, Amelia, you can roll 2 dice.
I got a blank and a minus.
Blank and a minus. This is great. Well, you'll see why in a second. The twisted wreckage of many dwarven automatons surround your Holdfast.
Yep.
Why did the dwarves attack in such numbers? And how did the Bone Bonded defeat so many of the dwarven war machines? So this question does a few things, and because we're on a podcast, I'm pulling back the curtain a little bit. 1, this references that destroyer that's blocking the bogs, because we don't know if it's inert or not. It also tells us that there are Bone Bonded in our Holdfast.
Yep.
They may not be player characters, but they are Bone Bonded, because there are some Holdfasts that don't have any.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, what do you all think? Why did the dwarves attack in such numbers? That's the first part of our question here.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this character creation series. We'll be back in part 2, picking up right where we left off.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts and guests, or even some of our character sheets. Character Creation Cast can be found on Twitter at CreationCast. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter at Lord Neptune. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. If you like the systems discussed and wish to purchase them, links to the products can be found in the show notes. Also, check the notes or the website for cool stuff to go with each character, such as dice or mixtapes. Thanks for joining us, and remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We will see you next time.
We gotta read some show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs. Character Creation Cast is hosted by the One Shot Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, visit oneshotpodcast.com, where you'll find other great shows like System Mastery.
System Mastery is a delightful stroll through the history of role-playing games. Except the games are terrible, and the hosts are real jerks about everything. Join hosts Jeff and John as they explore the weirdest games ever made to talk about what worked, what went wrong, and which Silverhawk was the best. It was Hot Wing, don't even add us. Find their shows at systemmasterypodcast.com or oneshotpodcast.com.
Finally,